No, you're fine. You're fine. Awesome. Well, thank you so much all for being here. We're super excited to have this budgeting workshop for you. My name is Natasha Reyes. I'm a peer finance coach with the Financial Wellness Center. You can read our mission there. I started this position back at September. I'm also a PR major, sports business minor here at the University of Oregon, and I'll pass it off to Jordy.
Hey guys, I'm Jordy Tilt. I've been a peer financial coach with Natasha since September. Yeah, I'm a history major, undergraduate student at UM. Okay, so just real quick, we want to just talk about what the Financial Wellness Center is all about. So we kind of focus on the big five, right? And that's earning, and with that comes budgeting, which that's what we're here to talk about today. Spending is managing the inflow and outflow of money, and talking about how to sort of manage fixed and variable expenses. Borrowing, which we have upcoming workshops on, and we've also given a bunch. We'll talk about how to check that out later. How to protect yourself from identity theft and fraud, and saving and investing. We have saving strategies and investing 101, which is actually an upcoming workshop for us.
Yeah, so at the Financial Wellness Center, we reach students through these three different ways. We give these workshops just like you guys are here right now for our budgeting workshop. We also do one-on-one peer finance coaching. So right now, virtual is just given the times, but you can schedule an appointment with one of us. It can be by name or by topic, and we're all trained and ready to help you all with any personal finance situation and assessment, specifically those big five that Jordy just went over. And then we also build partnerships around campus. So we have a lot of collaborations with different organizations and focus groups on campus. So this quote by Dave Ramsey here: earning a lot of money is not the key to prosperity, how you handle it is. So this is basically what I personally see as the cornerstone of budgeting. So when you think about budgeting, it's kind of a lot compared to dieting. So when you're about to go on a diet, they tell you can't eat this, need to do this, And it's a bunch of like checkbox marked things that you absolutely need to do or absolutely cannot do. You can't buy your Starbucks anymore. Same with budgeting. You can't buy your Starbucks anymore. You need to save X amount in order to be successful, in order to have, this lifestyle. And it's a lot of do's and don'ts. But I'd say that budgeting really comes down to your own personal preference and availability and your own preferred lifestyle. So everybody's budget is going to look different. It's going to be very personalized and tailored to you. So there's a lot of advice out there about, do's and don'ts. But what we're going to try and show you today is that budgeting really comes down to your own personal preference and the value that you put behind money, what you want to spend your money on, and just overall how you see your money in your own personal situation.
So just kind of simply said, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. And I really like what Natasha said, and I want to stress that everyone's budget looks different, right? It's like everyone has a different kind of income, and everyone has different kinds of needs and wants that they want to focus on saving up for, or just different kind of spending strategies they want to focus on. So yeah, just know that it's all going to look different, right?
So what we hope you learn today, learning how to track and discover where your own money's really going, recognizing the difference between fixed and variable expenses. And of course, we want to help you make your own realistic budget so that your money can stay on track and where you want it to go.
Let's talk about, before we hop into how to budget, let's talk why we budget, right? So what are some benefits of living with a budget? Firstly, money available to pay the bills, right? And I guess that's the most basic factor of budgeting, right? Is making sure that you're really focusing on those needs, right? We have a lot of wants, but we got to focus on rent, food, all that kind of stuff that, that should come, priority spending. It helps establish a record of paying bills on time, credit history, when we say money available to pay the bills, we also talk about money available to pay off a credit card or pay off any kind of loans you guys have, student loans as we move into the future after college, and all that sort of fundamental building that sort of financial history. And we have workshops about building credit history and what credit is. And so, we can focus on that more later. It lowers stress over finance. This is a big one for me. I think it's actually, for me, it's the most motivating reason why I budget, right? I'm very prone to financial stress. So with a budget, I feel a lot more confident in spending money. Like, let's say if I go out with some friends and I want to get something to eat out, right? You have to know I can confidently spend this money and be like, I budgeted it out. I can afford this trip, so I don't have to worry about it, afterwards. allows better focus on classes. That kind of ties in with the previous one about lowering stress. You know, if you're less stressed out, less anxiety, you're going to have a lot more time to focus on class, which, you know, is beneficial for all of us.
So the main component of a budget, the very first thing that we want you all to learn is the difference between fixed and variable expenses. So starting with fixed expenses, these are things that typically do not change from month to month and are always kind of around the same price range or stay at the same kind of capped price. So when you think of fixed expenses, think of things like housing. You know, you're paying your rent. You signed that lease and you are paying a certain amount of rent per month for 12 months, 24 months. So that is fixed. You can't change your rent all of a sudden. You can't not pay rent. So that cost is always going to be there. Same thing with tuition. You know, maybe depending on the amount of classes you might take, it might change, but it's always going to be in that same range. And tuition is always going to be there as long as you're a student. Same thing, car insurance, you have your same monthly payments. Cell phone, loan payments, you have that fixed monthly rate. Sometimes even credit cards can be fixed expenses because you have a fixed monthly rate. But, you know, when you think of fixed expenses, think of the things that you cannot change, that you know you are going to have to pay month in and month out.
I also want to add on that I think sometimes a lot of people get in the mind space that like Netflix or Hulu or all those subscription-based services, those are actually fixed expensive too, because they're reoccurring in the same amount every month. And I think actually, I definitely know for me at least, it's where I get got on my budget, right? Is that I have too many fixed expenses, right? I got Hulu, I got Netflix, I got Amazon Prime. And I think one of the important reasons we budget is to kind of pare down, I think in at least how a lot of us probably start, you know, are living our lives now, pare down those fixed expenses that we might not need.
Yeah, perfect.
Let's talk about variable expenses too. Variable expenses are gas, transportation, food, just things that change every month, right? You're unlikely to spend the same amount on gas every month. And food, grocery shopping, you're not going to spend the exact same amount. However, you can turn it into a fixed expense, which is what you're going to do with budgeting, is you're going to try to sort of look at all these expenses in a new light. Instead of saying like, oh, every month I could spend some crazy amount on entertainment, I'll spend the same amount every month. And we'll get to that too. Campus activities, yeah, that charge fees or dues, that's definitely a variable expense. Books are a variable expense that you can't really, you know, change, right? Because every term you're gonna have books that cost a variable amount. So
Yeah. I'd say, Jordy, too, a lot of like life things do become variable expenses. So say, oh, you know, it was my roommate's birthday this month. And so we ended up going out to a big dinner, spent a little more than usual. You know, I needed a new pair of shoes because I tore a hole in mine, you know, things like this that kind of just come up in life without plan or without, you know, that forward looking like perspective do tend to be variable expenses.
Yeah, great point.
So when we're comparing them, we, like Jordy just said, you want to kind of assess your variable expenses. And the whole goal of budgeting is to make variable expenses fixed expenses. So you have this game plan of what is going to be your monthly cost. So you're no longer going to be kind of jumbling back and forth between, you know, oh, well, this month I spent $1,000. This month I spent, you know, $1,400. And so you kind of want to cap off the things to make them fixed expenses. And so this is basically what budgeting is all about. And so we're going to go into a deeper dive right now.
All right, so let's get down into how to really start building your budget, and kind of keep this in mind because we're going to build a budget at the end of this class. We're going to send out a worksheet and we're all going to try to do it together. Of course, it's going to be tentative because you actually have to test it out, but it'll be fun. Step one, identify monthly income. So of course, the primary part of the budget, at least the most exciting part, is how much money you're making every month, right? And that could be anything from part-time earnings or full-time earnings, depending on how you work. Available savings, if you need to dip into savings, you know, that's definitely an available option for income. Family contributions. So, you know, if you're a family, you get a little bit of aid from the family every month. And then finally, you got to keep in mind that any kind of loans count as income, right? Any sort of loans that contribute to your, you know, daily life, or if you're trying to budget out, you know, student loan or student payments as a whole, then you consider that as income too. So it just depends on, again, you know, budgets are very personalized. It depends on what your situation is.
Yeah, don't let the word income kind of confuse you guys. Basically, any source of money that is coming to you. So how Jordy said, you know, whether that's a loan deposit, scholarship, grant, per diem, you know, an allowance, all of that counts as your income. It is money going to you. So step 2, track spending. So, a lot of times people like, I want to create a budget, what can I do? Where can I start? Kind of go right into it. But it's definitely like something else that you build up, you practice it, because you need to figure out where exactly you are. And by figuring out where you are, you need to look at your previous spendings. You need to look at your tracking history. So what we recommend is, if you've never done this before, you want to create a budget, you really want to just kind of go about your life how you do, and then for 1 week periods at a time, then look at your spending. And so, we suggest looking at your spendings for 1 week, for then 3 weeks, and then assessing that entire month. So really break it down into smaller timeframes to get a feel for where your money is actually going. So don't try to just change your habits all at once because you're suddenly spending. You want this to be tailored to your life and the lifestyle that you have now. And the best way to do that is to look back on where your money has been going these past few weeks or these past few months. So start by tracking spendings. Best way to do this, there's plenty of apps out there that you can, connect your debit or credit card to, and they'll kind of give you a good breakdown. I love handwritten notes. So I use my own spiral notebook where I compare my bank statements and write it down and kind of leverage them out. A lot of people just keep receipts and then they'll total those up at the end of the month. There's tons of different ways to start tracking your own spending. So definitely find one that works for you. If you're having trouble, finding a personal ones, we'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one, but definitely there's tons of different ways. And you want to start, week by week, month by month of knowing where your money is currently going.
Yeah, I really want to stress that there's all different kinds of ways to budget, right? And I think Mint is a very popular app that people like to use for that, for example. And also don't get discouraged if you try a method of budgeting and it doesn't work for you. Like, let's say you save all your receipts for this month and you just find that you can't do that for whatever reason. You're not organized in a way that's available to you. So maybe you try something else. Try the spiral notebook. I personally use Excel and I just plug it all in. But maybe you don't like that either. So just play around with it. I'm sure eventually you'll find some technique that is at least viable for you. All right. So step 3, comparing income and expenses. So this is kind of where we talk about what's left over, right? So if you have money left over at the end of the month, what can you do with it? Well, if you're trying to prepare for, it's always good to have an emergency fund. You can place it in savings, or more expenses than money, you get back on track. I do want to touch on a couple things here. So when we talk about placing it in savings, right? That coordinate says that you should only put money in savings if it's available to you at the end of the month. That's one way to look at saving, but another way is to look at it as a fixed expense. And that's actually, I think, how a lot of people do it, right? They'll budget out how much they're saving every month. So, whether it's 25% of your paycheck to 5% of your paycheck. You're saving some amount of money every month that, let's say, when you first get the check, if of course, if this is available to you, if you need to use all the money, then, you got to do it. But you can look at it like, oh, I got my check in the mail. I can take 25% right when I get it and deposit it into my savings. And it's painful, right? But it does help long-term with getting you to start having this habit of saving. And then more expenses than money, we got to get back on track, right? So let's say you had to dip into emergency savings because this month, either you overspent or there was an issue that arose, some unforeseen expense like medical bills or something like that, and you had to pay for it. So you got to just realize, okay, maybe 1 or 2 months were off. I know all the time I'll have a month where I'm like, oh man, I overspent. And then you just got to recognize, how can I either change my budget to accommodate myself, or how can I just, form better habits to make sure I'm not spending where I shouldn't be.
So how Jordy started saying, once you compare your income versus your expenses, and at the end of every month or the end of every 2 weeks, whenever you assess your budget, you're either going to have money left over or you're going to be over your budget. So this considering cost-effective alternatives definitely works if you find yourself a few months in a row now over your budget and you're really having trouble cutting back, or there's just not enough wiggle room to save. So cost-effective alternatives, come as meal plans. So maybe you adjust your meal plan, maybe the one that you're using, you're really not eating all that much food, so you can cut back on it to save a little bit of money. Books, there's tons of cheaper alternatives to books, whether that's Amazon, used book sources, buying from a friend. You don't necessarily just have to always go to the Duck store for the brand new book every single term. housing, even, maybe you're comfortable with housing right now, but there's definitely always some cheaper options out there if you're willing to look or to relocate or, to just reassess your current position. We put spring break on there, but that's just, a common word for hobbies or habits. Maybe you're going out with friends too much, or maybe you're going on a little bit too much vacations, or, you're really spending a little more than you should. And so there's definitely cheaper ways to do that. Instead of going, staying at this nice hotel, going to this amusement park, maybe just go for a hike, hang out with friends. You'll still get the same bonding experience, but the adjustments that you make in order to meet your budget are just sometimes looking at things through a different lens. For me, it came as I don't have to spend $5 on my coffee every morning. I can just invest one time in a coffee maker and kind of cut down that expense over time. Same thing with memberships, how Jordy was talking about, but really just looking at your own situation and kind of getting creative with which ways you can save.
Definitely. And then the other side of that is the earn more alternative, right? So, and this one you got to be a little careful with. I definitely think that you got to, you have to know your situation, know what you're comfortable with, and understand your time management, right? So, a pro could be, it would help with expenses, right? Let's say you got some sort of a side job on campus or off campus, right? And a con is that it can interfere with college, obviously, right? If you're spending a lot of time on work to afford your hobbies or necessities, then you should, you got to really be careful about that. Maybe it's better to look at the changing up how much you're spending instead. So there are a lot of job possibilities on campus and off campus. On-campus jobs are accustomed to students, right? So they work with your schedule and they're very understanding of class conflicts and that school is the priority here, right? And then off-campus jobs are less flexibility, possibly higher paying, depending on what kind of job you're getting. And there's a lot of options there. I real quick want to say, if you guys are looking for a job, we do have the Career Center on campus, and they're an excellent resource. And we also have Handshake, which if you guys are familiar with or want to look up, just, UO Handshake, and it will show you guys a lot of options and really get you involved in mass applications to work on campus.
So Jordy kind of touched on this, but we talk a lot about, the benefits of budgeting, how it's going to make your life a lot easier. But one big long-term benefit is it's definitely going to help you build your credit and have a great credit score as you go more into adulthood. So having a budget is going to make sure that your credit bills, credit card fees, all of that is paid on time. It gets you used to meeting a specific deadline, to, hitting and assessing your goals, your deadlines by paying certain amounts or by separating money to meet those certain amounts. So you can start building your credit, and having great credit can go a long way. That's going to help you, get better interest rates on loans, going to help show, banks and whenever you're going for a loan, buying a house, getting a car, showing that you are trustworthy in the payments that you make. And all of that kind of starts right now with the budgeting. So I saw a lot of, people talking about penny pinching, overwhelming, saving, stressful. So definitely I agree. A lot of, kind of those negative things do come with budgeting because it seems pretty hard at first. And it does seem like a very daunting, honestly, in my opinion, like adulting thing to do. And, just going into college, it seemed scary at first. But that's why we're here for you guys. And we definitely promise that, although this is just the basics, once you guys kind of get out there and do it on your own, you can definitely create your own budget and stick to it, live to it. It's just like you practice anything else. You practice a musical instrument, you practice your sport, you study for a test. This is just the same thing. You practice, and you get better at it. You refine, and you're able to make great progress as you continue on that track.
I also wanted to say that the stressful and penny pinching mindset, right? It's kind of scary, it's especially when you're not familiar with your own financial situation, which is, I know it's weird to say, but if you haven't really reflected on how much you spend, it could be kind of painful to do it the first time. I know, like when I started this job, I was like, well, I guess I better make a budget, right? So I made one and I was like, oh no. When you look at the income and outflow and you're like, all right, I got to fix this, right? So it can be a little daunting, but in the end, it's going to make you feel less stressed in the future, like Natasha was saying. So.
Yeah, budgeting is definitely a very rewarding thing that can gain you a lot of financial freedom.
Do you have, how's the chat looking for fixed versus variable expenses?
Looking really good. Lots of the stuff we talked about, fixed rent, variable utilities, fixed car insurance, variable gas, car insurance, gas, groceries, variable, travel, variable. Lots of good stuff here.
Definitely. All right, so now we're going to move into the budgeting activity. So I'm going to change over to a budget worksheet here. So we're going to make a budget together. So feel free to fill this out. And again, remember, it's very personalized, right? So hopefully your budget doesn't look exactly like mine, because that'd be unless I guessed perfectly on what your income and outflow looks like. All right, so I'm also going to go ahead and make a couple assumptions. We're going to assume that we're paying rent out of pocket with our job, and that we don't have car insurance right now, just to simplify things a little bit. But if you do, that's a very important thing to keep in mind, and that we don't have a car payment currently. And I can even play around with it a little bit and show what it would look like if you have car insurance too. So let's say your paycheck after taxes is around 1,100, right? And I know that's probably not accurate. It's not accurate for myself, but it is certainly a possibility, right? And then other income after taxes, for example, child support. And this is important to keep in mind too. So you have 1,100 coming in from your salary after taxes. And you can also think of this as like perhaps aid through loans, and then other income, for example, child support. Or also keep in mind that this could be family aid, right? All right, so let me go into housing, right? This is, as we talked about, a fixed expense, right? These are going to look the same every month, and they're not going to change. Utilities might change a little bit, but they should on average be roughly the same, right? So we're budget out the rent. Let's say your place costs $600 a month.
Jordy, I was going to say,
yes.
Maya has a good question here.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you account for annual expenses like car insurance every 6 months to 1 year?
Yeah, so we're doing a monthly budget. So what I would recommend is you take, you just divide whatever it is, if it's a year or if it's semi-annual, and you're going to sort of split it out over the months. And I know that's kind of painful probably, but what you can do is, instead of paying off the car insurance, or instead of paying it all off, kind of getting blindsided by that, what you can do is you can take that amount and put it into savings, right? So we kind of pretend we have a monthly car insurance payment, and we put it into savings. And then when you get that charge from car insurance, when the year's over or 6 months is over, whatever your rate is defined as, then you can pay it one lump sum, and it's not stressful at all because you've planned it out over this period of time. And it's sort of like it gets you in the habit of just preparing for that payment. Does that answer the question, I think?
Yeah, I think that was a good one. Let's see if Maya types.
I see the thumbs up. Thank you, Maya. So then we have internet, cable, phones, $20 a month. I hope your internet costs less than that. That's what mine costs, and it's very painful. So let's go down into food, right? So this is where we try to make things a fixed expense versus variable. So let's say groceries. I personally spend $200 every month on groceries. And that's completely up to you, though. Maybe you you love to eat a certain way that costs a little more, or you're a bit of a thrifty eater and you spend a lot less. So 200, I think, is sort of a lower to median amount. So it can be all over the place with how yours looks. And then other food expenses, you can look at this as eating out, things like that, right? Perhaps you're getting coffee, for example, from Starbucks. And I put $50 in there. You guys, again, it's all up to you. And the best way, remember, we talked about this in step 2, is to track it for a while. You do a month, and then you kind of get a feel for what it should look like. And then you can try to change how they look for the variable expenses. Okay, so transportation. Again, we're assuming you don't have any car insurance payments in this one, because I'm actually not too familiar with how much car insurance looks like, because I currently don't pay car insurance. So public transportation and taxis, I just put $5 in. Really, I think one of the biggest ways to cut down your spending is avoid Ubers and things like that. It really, I know when I first time I made a budget, you look at that Uber charge stacking up over time, you're like, man, I spend a lot on transportation that I probably could save somehow. Gas for car, $45 a month. Depending on how much you drive, that could be a lot more or a lot less. Again, Parking and tolls, we have $7 there. Car maintenance, now things like that, I think of as sort of the question with car insurance, right? You want to step that over time and put that into you kind of think of that as your emergency savings funds necessarily, unless you have routine car maintenance you need to focus on, or maybe you're prepping. For example, this month I'm going to have a big expense for like a car repair, but I know about it ahead of time for whatever reason. I can plan this month out budget wise, so I don't get seriously affected by that expense. So like if this month I know I have to get my car's oil changed, right? When I make the budget for this month, I can change that and put that in and be like, all right, car, I have to get my oil changed. So that I know I can change the way I spend on every other section. If that makes sense. Okay, medicine, health insurance, things like that, right? These are, again, when it comes to medical expenses, if you have a recurring amount that you have to focus on, whether that be prescriptions or some kind of copay, right? Definitely put that in here. You don't want to forget that, because that's an important thing, and that's a necessary expense, right? But one-time big expenses from medical issues, you think about that as like dipping into your emergency fund if you need to, sort of thing. Child care, child support. These are all, again, necessities that you should be marking down if you need them. Laundry, donations, entertainment, like movies and amusement parks. So this one's hard to make a fixed expense, right? It's almost always a variable thing, well, not the movies right now, but going to other kinds of entertainment, right? Whether that be a hobby, like maybe you like purchasing, I don't know, like you knit and you need to buy yarn, right? Maybe you try to put that into you give yourself kind of a set amount you're allowed to spend every month. Maybe you're really into fashion and you're buying clothes every month. Try to put a cap on yourself, which I know is painful, but like you're trying to be like, all right, once I've spent 50 to 100 to however much you feel comfortable with putting down on clothing this month, I got to stop, right? And that's a good way to really start quelling those expenses. Other personal family expenses like beauty care, getting a haircut, things like that would go in here. You want to plan that out ahead of time. That could be, shampoo, all those different kinds of things that you need. Finance. So, okay, this one, I didn't put anything down because I want to talk about this, right? Bank or credit card fees, right? This is a huge, important expense that we need to talk about. Let's say last month you didn't pay off your card completely, right? And you have overages or you have something like that, right? The most dangerous thing about credit cards is that you can get in this kind of cycle of debt where you just pay off the minimum and you start paying off this interest fee every month. You start getting charged interest every month and you kind of get in this circular cycle, right? Which is just bad. So you want to make sure when you budget, you can kind of step out. If you need to pay off your credit card at once, you can, and you're kind of prepared to do so. And you don't get caught in this cyclical credit debt. And then other costs, school, tuition, student loans, things like that. That is a cost that might happen every month or not. So think about that as kind of like, books, other fees, things like that. Obviously, you're not going to be spending $100 on school unless you got some real good scholarship, right? But think about that as like loans would factor in here too. So just keep that in mind. And the one thing that is not on here, other expenses month, you can think of it that way, or sorry, other payments, is credit and savings. Now, I didn't put savings as a monthly expense, right? But if you wanted to, again, we've already talked about this, but you could prepare to keep saving every month by just kind of taking, like I said, the paycheck was $1,100, right? Take 20% of that maybe, if you can afford that, or not, take 10%. And that's better than nothing. And it gives you in that habit of like, all right, every month, I know I really want to go, I want to buy a new game that just came out, but instead I got to put that 100 in savings before I even think about it. Because that way, when you have a huge medical expense or you have a big car repair expense or anything like that, you are prepared for it and you can dip into those emergency funds. All right. And then if you did the sheet yourself, you'll have a leftover amount like $3 or so. And there you go. Total monthly expenses. Ugh, doesn't that hurt to look at? I know it does whenever I see it. I'm like, oh, I spent that much this month. So yeah. All right. If you guys have any questions about that, feel free to put them in chat. But yeah, otherwise, I think
I'm going to read one out from Maya. So she's heard that the envelope method of budgeting, is something, but cash isn't really something that we always tend to have, especially, today we have a lot of credit cards, debit cards. Is there a way to portion funds within a bank account in a similar way? So in other words, just set money aside to save or to not spend.
That's a great question. And I think it kind of depends on what your banking situation looks like. But I think a way to do that would be, um, if you wanted to open multiple accounts, I think that'd be one way. But you got to be careful with fees and everything that's associated with that, depending on your financial institution. So I don't think that would be a go-to. What I would do is probably take note of it somewhere, whether that be just a document on your computer, or you could do it pen and paper, or even like your notes app in your phone, right? You can be like, okay, I got to partition this much out is for car insurance, right? I think that's the one we keep coming back to every month. I got to put this much away for car insurance. So last month, I I didn't spend $30 because I know I have a $30 car payment coming up. So in my mind, I know that $30 in my account has to be partitioned out. Or you could transfer it to your savings account and make a memo on the transfer, which I think is another way you could definitely do that. So you would transfer in $30 to your savings account and put a memo in that says for car insurance pay for June car insurance payment. Does that answer your question kind of?
Yeah, well, Jordy, I'll add too, because Maya had another question that, what are the benefits and drawbacks of having maybe multiple savings accounts? And I'd also add that that's definitely a very personalized decision to make. They're depending on what you want, maybe you want a big savings account just specifically for a house in the future. Or, maybe you only, you're just saving to save, for when you do reach adulthood or have a job or need that extra money. So really just depending on what you want to save for would depend on, the amount that savings accounts that you need. I personally just use one, transfer my funds over to my savings account. We're also, we don't know the benefits and the differences between which bank institutions offer you certain benefits or fees or, downsides to those savings accounts, but that's something we can definitely help you with in a one-on-one. And also, just doing more research with different banks and, looking at their websites about the differences in types of savings accounts that they have.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Natasha. And yeah, because some savings accounts have like fees associated with them because you have to have an account minimum or a certain number of transfers. And we're not opening savings account to get hit with fees, right? That's kind of antithetical to what we need. So don't do that, right? But maybe your institution allows for savings accounts with no minimums, and in that case, or maybe another debit account or sorry, checking account with no minimum or no fees. If you want to do it that way, that's totally legitimate too. I think you just got to look into your financial institution's documentation. And like Natasha said, we're happy to meet in a one-on-one to look into that further.
Awesome. So just to kind of sum it up, I know this budgeting definitely seems like a big daunting thing at first, but we hope this at least started to give you a good reference point. So we hope that and you're going to discover where your money is really going. We gave you some tips on how to do that and just kind of looking back on your expenses over week periods or monthly periods. Definitely want to convert as many expenses as possible, those varied expenses, into fixed expenses. So this means that you're planning ahead, you're kind of putting spending caps on it, and you're really being in control into how much money you are spending on what things. And then just making your own realistic budget so it stays on track. I dropped that link in the chat so that you all can save that to your own computer. Or, if you need a more specific, personalized, tailored one to you, we'd be happy to meet one-on-one to go over those specificities. Awesome. And then just please definitely, you want updates, you want it now, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, UOFin Wellness. There's our direct financial wellness email if you need it. Jordy and I can also drop our personal ones in the chat if you need it. And then we have recordings of all of our workshops on YouTube that you can go back and reference.